I, I have a friend of mine that she goes through matrimonial ads all the time, you know, the announcements. And she came up with one that I think is relevant here. I'm going to read it for you. I am not a doctor, nor a lawyer. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an expert in human nutrition. I have a limited experience in farming. I have an open mind, and I'm willing to learn. I can cook, and I like riding horses. Human nature, I believe it is human nature to be bound by convention. Convention in the conventional sense of the usual and accepted way of behaving and doing something. And caution. I caution it with an old Chinese proverb, 3 men make a tiger. If none of you have heard of this, I'll explain it a little bit. It was a Chinese official asking the king of Wei, hypothetically, if he would believe that there was a tiger roaming in the market. And the king said he wouldn't believe it was one person. The official then came back and said, well, if there were 2 people reporting a tiger, the second person reported a tiger, the king said, I will consider it. And the official said, well, if a 3rd person reported a tiger roaming in the market in the main city, would you believe it? And the king said, I would believe it. 3 men make a tiger. In the 60s and 70s, I had the opportunity to live in the most amazing cultures in Borneo, in Papua New Guinea, in India, in Africa. In the 90s actually, I had the opportunity to work and live in Latin America and in Europe, in the Far East also. In the 21st century, I've had the privilege of living and working in Romania. By definition, creativity is about breaking patterns or conventions. And we start to break patterns when we understand that there's more than one path in life. We've all had a glimpse of these paths. Turquoise waters, white sands, swaying trees, you know. There's another dream, you know, the little cozy farm with furry animals, maybe log fires, you can write a book there. Recognizing there's another path is not the problem. The hard part is having the conviction to step off the path you're on and leap off into the unknown to find creativity and the freedom that comes with it. I chose the farm option. I bought a farm in Romania in 2005. It was an auction, and it had 15 buildings, and it looked okay on the paper. So, yeah. By the time I got there were no more roofs left on the building. The electricity had been torn out, and I was left with, this is a pretty good picture of what I was left with. I think I could have found a little less expensive and less frustrating pattern breaker in my life, but there you go. I'll tell you more about the farm later. I want to talk to you about food conventions and how these affect us profoundly. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. How often do we buy food? We go to a shop and supermarket and we pick up food and we buy the food. Well, for most of us, most of the time. If it's in the shop, if it's in the supermarket, it must be okay. I mean, after all, we have a lot of organizations taking care of our food, and they've been doing this for many, many years. We have international, regional, national regulators that all look after this stuff. I mean, the FAO has the Codex Alimentarius. ISO, HACCP, I think some of you have heard of these things. I think we've handed over the responsibility for our food to the regulators, and to industry. If they decide it's fit to eat, we eat it, we buy it. Well, what if it's all gone too far? What if industry has focused on increasing the quantity of food and cheaper food for us? And in the meantime, in the process, they've added lots of stuff to it to make it last longer. What if regulators have focused on eliminating the pathogens from our food? And in the meantime, they've taken lots of stuff out of the food. Okay, so we got pathogen-free food. It looks better, it feels better, it smells better, it travels further than the real thing. I'm thinking, this is not so good. I'm going to show you a little clip here.
Far from a chemical-soaked, reconstituted hoof and organ slurry, pink slime is actually a delicious, wholesome meal you'd want to share with a friend. Specifically your best friend, because up until 2001, it was used only in dog food. Only in dog food.
Good, huh? Well, I think as consumers we become really complacent in accepting food conventions. We've been for years feeding ourselves on, and our children, on lower quality food. And by lower quality food, I'm talking about diversity, I'm talking about high intake of refined carbohydrates, and I'm talking about not so good things added to the food, and a lot of good things taken out of the food. No diversity. There's been a study published in 2010 that identified 12,000 species of plants that we've collected for food. We use today 12 species, plant species, to provide 80% of our food intake. That's a pretty amazing statistic. Diversity. 12 species also processed into lots of different things that we contribute to our refined carbohydrates. We're talking about high input agricultural systems. Not so good things added. Now, not those OP pesticides. These are organophosphate pesticides, which have been linked to autism in children. But it works by irreversibly blocking an enzyme that is critical to nerve function in the bugs that you're trying to kill. It's also works on people. But in the USA, 33 million tons of the stuff was used in 2010. Good elements removed putting things in. We're using things in food. I'll go back to the pink slime. Pink slime is this stuff, if anyone's heard of it. It's the stuff it's the lowest cuts of the meat, and it's the sinew and the cartilage and things like that you don't normally eat. And what they do is they heat it up, centrifuge it, they take the fats out, they then mince it up, and they wash it with ammonium hydroxide, which is a bleach. And then they squeeze it into pellets, freeze it, and then send it off as food filler for other products. The statistic was that March this year that 70% of the ground meat products in the United States contained this stuff. And the allowable value is 25% that you can put in. So all the hamburgers and that sort of stuff. It's horrible. Anyway, this is the food we're eating, and it's safe, by the way. Who's deciding what's safe for us? At the same time, you can take milk. Milk processing is the same sort of process where the milk is standardized. So it's heated, it's all the fat's taken out, it's then put back together where you can have 0%, 0.5%, 3.5%, you can have flavors, chocolate, strawberry, calcium added. It's all fantastic. Fermented milk. Fermented milk is a product. Let's see what we can add to milk. This is the kind of stuff we can add to milk according to the Codex Alimentarius. Now, some of this stuff here, I mean, this is only one page of 4. I couldn't fit it onto the pages. Some of this stuff, like saccharin, I think is one of them, and the cyclamates. The studies have been made, that they link it to behavioral problems as children, and also to cancer in rats or rodents. And I know it's not proof of the effect on humans, but really, I'm not going to wait around for the effective conclusive evidence of this. Good elements removed from food. I'm going to give you another convention. Boil your raw milk before you drink it. I've done it for many years, and I suddenly realized, why am I doing this? Heat treatment, pasteurization, takes the milk up to 71.7 degrees, or UHT as we know it, takes it up to 135 degrees, well above the boiling point. It removes all of the bacteria, kills them all, the good ones and the bad ones. It also destroys the enzymes, good enzymes. It also takes away a lot of, denatures some of the vitamins. So the result is a bacteria-free product with no enzymes and no bacteria and less vitamins. And you can have the added value of the added toxins that we had before. So, but it's safe for human consumption. Ironically, raw milk is not legal. The sale of raw milk is not legal in 28 states of America, Canada, Australia, and Scotland, I think. Food quality, the good food, the safe food we're eating, has an impact on our health. I'm not a doctor. These are statistics from the World Health Organization. 36 million people out of 57 million deaths were attributed to non-communicable diseases. These are things like heart disease, stroke, cancer, chronic respiratory. The things I've highlighted here are food-related. Amazing. So there is a link between the bad food we eat and health. A couple of years ago, I was on the farm, and I opened up a block of UHT milk, and I used it in my tea, and I thought nothing of it. Until later on, I realized that I hadn't pulled that little foil thing off, so it had been open for a while, and I didn't know how long until I talked to some friends, and they said, well, it's been there for about a month. I said, whoa, safe food. Evidently, no self-respecting bacteria or fungus wanted anything to do with the stuff. Scary, yeah? But safe. I'm going to talk about why taking the good bacteria out of the milk isn't such a good thing in our safe food environment today. We have an awareness that we are missing healthy gut flora in our stomachs. We're ingesting more toxins, and we're taking more antibiotics and birth control pills, and so basically we're killing everything in our stomachs. And as I understand this, I'm not a doctor, but our digestive system is full of is lined by these little cells called enterocytes. And these enterocytes are replaced every 2 or 3 days, so they're quite active, but they need building blocks. The building blocks, they need food, basically, proteins, lipids, enzymes, etc., and certain fats. And they also need the beneficial bacteria, the probiotic bacteria, to orchestrate the whole process. Now, also the little cell walls of the probiotic bacteria have these things called chelators. And these are things that grab onto the toxins, like the leads and the mercuries. They grab onto them, hold them, until it's passed out of our body. So they're very useful things, as I understand it. So if we kill all the bacteria with antibiotics, then the yeasts and the fungi take over and dominate our internal systems. Now, this pathogenic domination weakens the immune system, and it compromises the intestinal functions, and basically increases the risk of disease. I've read this, and there is a lot of stuff on this. Now, there is an acknowledgement that we have moved away from a long way away from traditional systems. And we've been focusing on treating the symptoms, the health problems. But the real problem is the food, maybe. And the food, we have been funding it. We have been pushing huge amounts of resources into increasing the food production, the processing technology, and the techniques to meet the demand of growing populations and safe food products at the same time. Now, as a society, we have become so arrogant to throw away thousands of years of processing skills and food production skills and knowledge. And we have basically used this in exchange for efficiency, convenience, and profit. I'm not attacking the regulators. They have managed to reduce the amount of deaths, and not attacking the pharma industry, because there have been huge strides in the effectiveness of pharmaceutical treatments. But at what cost? 36 million deaths for non-communicable diseases in 2008. And there is awareness of problems. Even the General Director of the FAO in 2010. I'm going to go back and visit the farm now. What am I doing? I have buffalo on the farm, fantastic animals, and they're fed on pasture grass. I feed them nothing else. They eat quality food, basically. And they give me about 6 to 10 liters of milk a day, so not the 25, 35, 45 liters in an animal. These animals will live for 25 years, and they're really cool. One day, some time ago, a friend lent me a book. Mate, I haven't given it back yet, sorry. And in that book, there was this thing. It really popped out at me. Raw milk cures many diseases. Now, this was something back from the 1929, I think the research was done, or 1930s, right? And Dr. Crew was one of the founders of the Mayo Clinic. So he was a pretty big guy. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. Raw milk cures many diseases. And you know what? It was about, they were talking about chronic liver, they were talking about diabetes, obesity, and so on. And I thought, this is amazing. You know, let's have a look at research today. And I looked, and I looked, and I looked. And I looked, and I'm still looking. If there is something about this curative properties of milk, or fermented milk products, we have the responsibility to try and do something about it, to learn more about it. I have the buffalo. Clean milk, good milk. We have made strides in terms of the technology of cooling and storing milk. There are people around the farm that are suffering from diabetes, chronic liver stuff. Why not offer them some milk? And if their condition improves, we'll see something in this milk cures. But who would believe this type of approach? We live in a cynical world where such simplicity has no place. There is more money to be made from curative medication than preventive actions as simple as food. Okay, let's look at a proper clinical trial. Let's get some super expensive, internationally accredited company to undertake some clinical trials in the area with the raw milk. And that data can be scrutinized by everybody. I have the milk. There are potential volunteers. Can this be done? It'll be an uphill struggle, but I hope I will try and do this. I have some friends that are doing this crowdfunding for their movies, mainly. And I approached one of them the other day and I said, listen, is it possible to come up with an idea like this and try and raise money for this type of approach? And he was getting quite excited about it. So I intend to take this forward. But remember, the 3 men make a tiger? A lot of tigers out there. Last year, I had the privilege of meeting somebody, a really interesting guy who talked to me about permaculture. And the whole farm I have now is undergoing this whole change in the systems that we're looking at. He talked to me about forgotten varieties of perennial plants as opposed to annual plants. These are things that you put in the ground, you leave them there, and they grow year after year. I thought, hey, this is a good idea. It's not so much work for me. food forests, stable ecosystems, water management, all of this stuff was, amazing. I'm not going to get into it now, but I thought this is wow. It all sounded fascinating. And the philosophy behind it was basically working with nature rather than against it, that we see with our monoculture in the agricultural systems we have today. A lot of inputs, and when we have a drought like this year, it's a real disaster. I've implemented this year food forests, which are basically fruit forests with berries, and there's a 7 level of production in these forests, and next year we'll go on to implement this a bit more. I want to see if these systems can be applied commercially, because then that can be translated and other people will adopt them, and hopefully we can change a little bit the way that we produce our food. And I'm very interested in the research in fermented foods, vegetables. Traditionally, also, they are very, very good collators, apparently. There's been a lot of research on collators. And I would like to progress this. We've also started with bees for their honey and pollination services. And going back to the initial concept of jumping off into the unknown, it's been a really interesting journey so far. And to be honest, I'm enjoying it. Thank you for your generous patience.